Hello, it is episode 58 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Yes, we are live a little bit earlier than usual. I guess I should just get this out of the way now. We don't know what the hell our schedule is going to look like for Worlds this year. We think that we're going to do some episodes every so often. We will update you guys later because it'll take way too long to get into it. Blue Jay and JNT 250. We've got some rumors, JNT, already starting. Let's start with the big one, of course. The return of Bjergsen, question mark? That didn't take long, did it?
Yeah, it didn't. Like, not at all. I kind of felt like this was probably coming with TSM not making Worlds because it's got to feel like a big disappointment for you to make a very pivotal move in your career in an attempt to benefit your team and then you fail. And
Yeah.
you could just imagine like Bjergsen probably sitting there himself watching his team lose and be like, if I was in this game, I would have won it. Or like if I was in this game, I would have told my team to do this and this and this. And like I assume as a former player who retired very, very recently and retired on top after just winning the split, like you just got to imagine like he probably thinks he's still got it. He obviously probably does still got it. I think should he jump right back into LCS right now, he would be a top player for sure, no doubt about it. And that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt in people's minds about will Bjergsen be good. I don't think there's any doubt there. There's a little bit of doubt about which team he's going to, but I don't think there's very much of it, to be quite honest. The one thing that I want to touch on, I don't remember this specifically, but when he stepped down, was it because he thought it was best for the team, or was it just that he needed a break? Do you remember anything like that?
I don't remember hearing anything about him ever needing a break per se, but I definitely think that, he was sort of, I guess, because we kind of heard, after the whole offseason with TSM, like the offseason was pretty wild for them because, they didn't really know who they were going to get at support. It was originally supposed to be Pallet, who was like a very, very good VCS up and coming support. He was supposed to be one of the best in the league. And then that kind of fell through. And Doublelift, he didn't really want to play with him in the first place because there was going to be a language barrier and, there was going to be that whole, basically a whole year of getting to know and trust this new support. And then you kind of saw a Doublelift bail, and then Sword Art kind of comes on last minute. And at the same time, you bring in players like Power of Evil and Hooney, who have found success on previous teams, and you were hoping could sort of mold together a world's caliber team with this TSM roster because you have a ton of different playstyles on it. Like if you look at it top to bottom right now, you had Hooney, who's like normally a very, very aggressive player who wants to get a lot of resources, wants to get a lot done in lane. You have Spica, who up until this season has normally been a pretty passive player who plays more for the team than himself, will often sacrifice, his own jungle camps and times to help his laners with ganks pulling summoners or making dives happen. And you have Power of Evil, who's this like super, I don't want to say selfish because I feel like that means negative, but he's a very selfish player in terms that he likes to play around his lane solely. He likes to play for waves. He doesn't like to roam too much. He would rather push his wave and reset than sack a wave and roam. And I think, Bjergsen probably felt that he was going to be that missing piece to like make this whole roster fit. And, ultimately it didn't work. And, he obviously still has that hunger and drive to want to play and want to succeed. And I think that'll probably keep happening, I guess.
Yeah, and the one way of looking at this is some people could say that maybe he's just tired of coaching or doesn't like coaching, and so that's why he wants to go back to playing. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think it's just that he likes competing more. If I were to guess, it's probably that he just enjoyed playing a lot more than he does coaching, and so why not go back to playing? Especially since he's been coaching, and so therefore like your League of Legends brain and like your meta brain and all that stuff is still there from coaching. Like you're actively using your mind and using your like I said, it's just game sense won't go away if you're still involved with competitive play, and obviously coaching, that's not going to go anywhere. And so that's why I don't think there's any fear of him going back to any team. Now, I think most people are assuming that he'll go back to TSM, but the rumors did say, I'm paraphrasing here, that he was looking at options LCS and LEC, if I'm not mistaken. And so I don't want to just go out there and just assume that he's going to TSM, although I think we have to throw out there that he does have ownership of TSM.
Yeah, I think it's funny because it felt like we went through this exact situation just a couple of years ago when Bjergsen was a free agent, and I feel like a lot of the rumors were that he wanted to join 100 Thieves in North America, or he wanted to go back to the LEC and join a team like Fnatic or join Rogue, and that was kind of like the rumors of Rogue were like before everyone knew that Larson was like one of the best mid laners in the league. And I felt like we had this whole situation play out before, and it ended with Bjergsen getting part ownership in TSM. So to be honest, I think I'd be very surprised to see him go to any other team that's not TSM, especially because he can leverage the fact that he is a part owner into probably getting himself the best possible contract from TSM.
Yeah, and that's what I would assume as well. Now, I guess he still could go to another team. You would just have to sell whatever stake you have in TSM. Obviously, if for those that don't remember, there was a little bit of some issues with that with Cloud9, whereas I believe they gave it to, you can remind me, J&T, I think they gave some equity to Jensen, Sneaky, and maybe another player. And then Jensen ended up playing for another team while he still had equity in Cloud9. Obviously, a conflict of interest there. And C9 got fined for that because you're not supposed to do that. So I believe this time around, if Bjergsen for whatever reason decided to go to another team, he would have to get rid of his stake in TSM. Now, I want to entertain the idea of other teams possibly going after Bjergsen, not because I think it's likely, but because there is always a chance. And so, if you're Bjergsen, you've probably got to have a bunch of teams reaching out to you. Like, this is like the GOAT of North America here, guys. So let's remind everyone that just because he's been with TSM all the time doesn't mean that's the only team that's going to give him an offer. And where I would go with this first is to say, if you're Team Liquid or Cloud9, would you rather have Bjergsen than your Jensen or your Perks, J&T?
It's hard to say because I think that question can be answered much easier right now than before because obviously Perks and Jensen didn't have the greatest splits in comparison to their history and what they're normally known for. Perks is, he's the best player all time in the LEC in terms of, career and whatnot, I would say. And, coming over to NA, he had a pretty successful first split and looked really, really good in playoffs when he finally did come online and, played very, very well. And I think, similar to Jensen, like this guy all time has either been the best or second best mid laner in the LCS ever since he joined, pretty much. Maybe not his first split because that was kind of a weird split for Cloud9, if people can remember, where they didn't make playoffs but still made Worlds because of Gauntlet. But these are two players who have always been atop their role in their region, and I think both of them had their worst splits ever very recently, this last split. So I think, you could easily say, oh yeah, you'd rather have Bjergsen because last time we saw Bjergsen, he was smurfing the whole league. But, you got to also understand, like, Bjergsen is a player who will, one, kind of warp your whole team because he does have a very dynamic playstyle in terms of, again, like, it does
it's
kind
really not selfish. It's really, he's not a
Yeah.
selfish player by any means. He'll play whatever.
Yeah, well, he'll play whatever, but he wants to play some specific style. Like I feel like when you bring in Bjergsen, it's because you're gonna play Bjergsen's game and you're gonna design your team around him, as opposed to bringing him in and molding him into your team.
Yeah, and I do want to point out something else that a good buddy of ours, Borbo, in the live chat brings out, is that, well, obviously Bjergsen probably has some loyalty to TSM, and that's something we can't take out of the equation. And that's why I think you and I mean, stop me if I'm putting words in your mouth here, J&T, but that's why I think you and I would probably say that TSM is just a heavy favorite, because this is the org that he knows, and this is the org that he's always been with for, I don't know, 7 years now or something like that. Maybe 8. It's been a long time. I think season 3 he came over, right?
Yeah,
So
and I mean that's also like
quite some
part of
time.
that's part of the reason why I would say that like Bjergsen will probably stay at TSM in the first place is because if his aspirations are to, it's completely different. Like if his aspirations are to be on the most competitive team possible, I think it's likely that, he's probably not going to stick with TSM, and there will probably be options either in Europe or in North America where if he really kind of like takes a step back and looks at the big picture, will be a better spot competitively than TSM. But at the same time, if his goals are, like loyalty or, whether it's financially, like be having that part ownership of TSM, like really can leverage your position to just get like the best contract available in terms of, what you want to accomplish. But you do kind of see these players who would rather, they would rather take less money to go to a competitive team than just take the paycheck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the reason why I brought up Cloud9 and Team Liquid again, I just need to be clear, it's not because I think that's what's going to happen. It's because those are the orgs that have money to spend. Um, maybe 100 Thieves has that kind of money to spend, but I don't think they would, especially since they just spent for Abadage. And so I guess my thoughts are, if it's not TSM, I think it would be more likely to be in Europe.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
what I would say. I really don't see him going to any North American team that isn't
that isn't
TSM.
TSM, right?
And if he wanted to go to a region like Europe, well, I guess that would probably be the only other region he would go to. I think the options are kind of wide open at this point. I think the only one that's really kind of eliminated is Caps with G2,
Right.
just because of how long his contract is, and the player that he is. Sure, he had a bad year. That can happen to players, but he's probably still, you know, with a relative time frame here, the best player in the LEC.
Well, and he just re-signed, did he not?
Yeah, he did. He just signed a
Right.
1 year extension.
And so that really would make even less sense. I mean, unless you're looking for some sign and trade deal, but I think we're far, far, far from that to even get into those weeds. The other things that I want to talk about before we move on are what this means for other people. A lot of people, if you saw the tweets when this news broke from the Upcomer, I believe is the website, with Fion on Fire, is people started adding double lift. Like, hey, you coming back too? I don't think so. Now, I don't know if Doublelift replied to this, so I'm sorry if I missed any replies or anything like that, or I didn't even watch any of Doublelift streams. So if anybody's got any information that I don't know, please feel free to share. But to me, I think Doublelift seems more than happy to be doing his co-streams. I think he loves just hanging out. He still gets a shit ton of viewers, even on just his regular streams, let alone the co-streams. I think he's happy just chilling, honestly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, he's even said it himself that he does really enjoy the co-streaming aspect of his stream, and that, he did, in terms of like actually playing the game, he said that he needed to take a bit of a break to sort of just like get a bit of a mental reset because NA solo queue is, we don't even have to go down that rabbit hole, but it's a bit of a joke.
He just
Especially
said there's
for,
nothing that it's not rewarding to him, is what he said. He's like,
yeah,
if I'm rank one, who cares? Is what he said, which
yeah.
I
And,
agree.
and I mean, on the flip side to that, like, one of the main things that a lot of veteran players will always talk about is that, like, once you've sort of lost that initial passion for the game, like it's more of a job. Like, you can kind of tell, like, that's what had happened with Doublelift. Like, not to say that like he was like just cashing in or whatever, but it was more a job to him than playing the game for enjoyment. Like, one of the main examples that I like to use is Reckless would always talk about how Caps was like he loved to play the game because he loved like the small little parts of League of Legends, like is like the lore and like listening to champion quotes and whatnot, and as opposed to like a player like Reckless who is strictly playing this game because he wants to win worlds and that's his one and only goal. And that doesn't mean that that makes you a bad player or less motivated than other players. It's just the kind of emotional attachment you feel within the game and kind of what drives you to be the best. And once you're at a point where you don't believe you can be the best, or the team that you could be on will not be the best, that motivation kind of goes away, especially for those players who really only have international success in their sights.
Well, and another thing with Doublelift as well is that when he retired, like his last year was not that good in comparison to Bjergsen was still one of the best. I did not think Doublelift was one of the best at the end of his in his last season
No,
with
he was
TSM
bad.
and Team Liquid. Yeah, he was probably an average 80 carry in the LCS, which is not what we know of Doublelift. And so I guess what I'm saying is if he were to even want to come back, I think he's got a lot of work to do. And I mentioned before how Bjergsen's been involved with the LCS still. Doublelift hasn't really been doing that. He's kind of just been chilling doing his co-streams, which is totally fine. But I think the comeback for Doublelift would be way more difficult. Um, the other last thing that was kind of obvious that like out of players that this impacts is Power of Evil now. And for those that don't remember, when PoE signed with TSM, one of the things that he wanted assured to him is that Bjergsen won't sub in and take his spot.
Mhm.
And of course, that didn't happen at all this year. But there was no promise that Bjergsen wouldn't come out of retirement the next year. And while now PoE, you got to assume won't be with TSM. Again, not for sure, but probably not. And so now you might have PoE as one of the most valuable pieces going into the off season, especially if Cloud9 wants to keep Perks and if TL wants to keep Jensen. The big spenders aren't exactly there anymore, and so Power of Evil might have to go to a lower tier team again as far as skill is concerned, and maybe the return to FlyQuest. I don't know.
or go back to Europe.
Possibly, who knows?
If
Another team.
I was Power of Evil, considering like we just kind of outlined what the suitors would be in NA, like top
Mhm.
teams, you would think Cloud9 will stick with Perks depending on World's performances. You would think TL is going to stick with Jensen. Well, TL will stick with Jensen because they re-signed his contract. Um, I would think that Jizuke kind of earned himself the job on Evil
Yeah.
Geniuses for how well he played. Abadag is with 100 Thieves. So basically, outside of those teams, you're looking at either sixth or below for
Yep.
Power of Evil. And those are going to be your teams like Immortals, FlyQuest, Dignitas, CLG. Like I think I
I think
might
he's
I think I might
so.
go back to Europe and join like an SK or something and like actually have a chance.
But who's to say for sure that he's even going to get an offer from those teams, right? Because there's questions of affordability when it comes to some of the European teams. Maybe they don't want to spend. Maybe like if you think about what it costs to sign PoE, I'm sure it's not super expensive. It's not perks levels, but I bet you it's not super cheap either. And maybe it's just way more valuable for a team like SK to not spend on PoE and just bring in somebody that they or not even just SK, any up and coming rookie from the LEC. Because
Yeah.
let's be honest, EU Masters spits out a lot of talent.
Oh, they
So
do.
maybe there's no answer for PoE to go to the LEC. And my thoughts were that, like you said, pretty much all those teams outside of Dig, I don't think Dig would spend for him, but I think CLG,
Well, he was
Immortals,
already
and
there.
FlyQuest would maybe. He's been with CLG. Well,
Yeah.
technically, he's been with all three of them if you want to count Immortals as Optic.
Yeah.
But who knows if Immortals is willing to spend, because they just did a whole uh, what's the term, um,
I forgot to mention Golden Guardians
rebuild
as well.
rebuild. Yeah, I'm not counting on them spending
No,
ever.
yeah, well, I kind of
I
realized
does
that, like,
That doesn't mean that they won't spend ever. I'm just not counting on it, because the one year that we thought they had a chance to spend, they obviously couldn't because of COVID and blah blah blah. I mean, we've heard that story a million times. We don't need to go into that. I just don't think that's happening anytime soon.
what I will
So
say is that I don't think Power of Evil's value has increased since last year, where he was on FlyQuest, did look really good, went to Worlds, did look really good, and then I still will maintain the position that Power of Evil was the worst performing player on TSM.
yeah, I just don't agree with that. I still think I that doesn't even mean that I think he was great, but I don't think he was the
I
worst.
don't think he
But
was. I'm
anyways,
not saying he was bad. I'm just
that's getting a little bit into the weeds. That I think we
yeah.
can have
At
that
least
discussion another
we got to
time.
stop talking about TSM. Shout
Anyways,
out my TSM Legends hard on because they lost.
yeah. You
I
didn't
love
watch
that
it yet, or
shit.
did you
No, I
watch it?
did. I love that shit.
I actually thought it was really good. You know what was really
No, it was
interesting to
good.
me?
I actually thought like Speaka, like it was good, like to see the whole Speaka thing, and
Yeah,
I liked
and
it.
I liked it too, and I don't want to get too far into it, but one thing that stood out to me was Bjergsen saying to his team, like, guys, as long as we're starting fights again, I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, we want to be the ones to start fights, and I'm like, yes, that's right. How come we never see that then? Like, Bjergsen is telling them what you think they should hear, because in my opinion, TSM was not very proactive, as I've said many times. Despite the fact that I've heard people say TSM is proactive, I just think that's nonsense. And so you're hearing Bjergsen say to them in the middle of their series in TSM Legends, he's saying, like, guys, we need to be the ones to start the fights. I'm like, yes. And they're just not finding any fights. So I was like, wow. So clearly they know what they need to be doing. They just weren't able to do it. And that was something that stood out to me in TSM Legends. Um, anything else, J&T, on the whole Bjergsen news?
Final prediction: Bjergsen to TSM, Power of Evil to SK.
Interesting. I think
I
I
just
think
like
PoE is
SK.
going to
I
stay.
would like him to go on SK. I don't know.
I mean, I like SK too. I don't know. I don't know how willing or not willing they would be to spend. Right. That's where I don't have that an idea of what teams are willing to spend in Europe. Whereas I kind of have an idea in North America. I think FlyQuest is desperate enough that they'll want him back, just because of. I mean, you went to Worlds one year and then you just had one of the worst possible years you could have the next. I think if you want to continue to grow that FlyQuest brand like they were doing, I think you would bring him back. So I'm gonna predict PoE goes back to FlyQuest, but who the hell knows? For his sake, I hope that God he doesn't go to CLG. I think we all can agree with that.
I would say the same thing about FlyQuest, but
uh, I don't know. FlyQuest has had some success. I don't
they're a
I
bit of
don't
a
think you
they're a
can
bit of
compare.
a dumpster fire right now.
Yeah, but I think that could happen to any team. CLG's been a dumpster fire for like years now, so
This is true.
I don't. I think it's a little different, but I could see the parallels there. Um, Before we move on, we're gonna get into some Worlds update stuff, and then we're gonna do a Worlds tier list. Before we move on, I do want to mention. I mentioned it at the top of the show. As far as our scheduling for Worlds, guys, it is very everywhere, and it is always subject to change. Just be aware that we will let you know at the end of this episode because it's too long to get into now. I'm gonna let you guys know at the end. So stay tuned for that if you're interested in knowing when the hell we're doing our stream. Okay, let's do the Worlds update thing.
Yep.
Start it off, JNT. What's first on the Worlds update?
Yeah. Well, now that all the regional leagues have concluded, we got all of our Worlds teams, and like we said, we're gonna get into a little bit of a Worlds tier list. But we do have some Worlds quick news, if that makes any sense. I just thought of that right now. It works. We're going with it. First up, Riot did confirm, although everyone knew that Worlds was going to be held in Iceland again after the whole switch from China back to Europe and then the success of MSI. They did confirm that Worlds is going to be in the same location as last time. So I presume it's going to be the whole same setup and everything, but probably with new graphics, new colors, and everything like that. It'll look really good because MSI did look really, really good. I love the whole green and black color scheme. Thought that was super cool. Yeah. I would think off the top of my head, obviously Worlds, they kind of roll with this black and blue theme, and I would assume they'll probably do something to contrast a little bit with like the Valorant Worlds that's going on right now, or like the Valorant Major. Because I don't watch that much Valorant, but it's kind of like purple and red type stuff that they got going on.
Yeah, I don't watch it at all.
Okay.
If I'm being completely honest. So you mentioned that like you think it'll be a success. I would say I hope it's a success. And the reason why, so if the whole time they planned on doing it in Iceland and they knew where their venue was going to be and all that stuff, I wouldn't worry at all because like you said, they had such a success with MSI. Even last Worlds was great, considering that they had to do quarantine and all that stuff. My worry is like this pivot, as they call it, is so like last second, like a month or two out from your event, you pivot your whole event to a whole nother continent. That's where I'm a little bit worried. And I won't fault them if there's some issues that they have, but clearly they even had to push back the start of Worlds because I think, and stop me if I'm wrong with this, but I think they started in September last year, right? Playing started in September.
Yeah, but they've also kind of crunched the schedule a little bit, so maybe that's the case, maybe not.
This year they're starting in early October. They're starting a week or two later. And yeah. I mean, again, I don't fault them for that, but that's why I'm a little bit worried. I think they got to push things back just so they can get all this stuff ready. I'm so not an expert as far as setting up a massive event like Worlds that like I can't even pretend to know what they're going through right now. And so, yeah, I mean, who knows? Hope for the best, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Next up, Unified. PSG Talon's starting AD carry, who wasn't able to travel with the team to MSI, is medically cleared to travel to Worlds because previously I think he had a lung issue, and that's why one of the reasons why he wasn't competing at MSI in the first place. He wasn't able to travel, so they at the time were using Beyond Gaming AD carry Doggo as like an emergency replacement. And I feel like a bunch of times now we've seen like PCS teams like been approved for emergency replacements because we had that with Doggo and MSI. Yeah. We had that with PSG Talon last year as well when they're starting mid jungle River and Tank were couldn't go. I think it was because of a visa situation and they had to get
they ended up getting there at some point though, didn't they? Didn't one of them join like
tournament? It was they joined like after play-ins and for the main stage and they had Kyungyue and somebody else from...
Yeah. Was Uniboy on that team? Am I mixing up?
You're thinking of Unified, who was the AD carry at that time.
Okay. Anyways, I this is sort of... I'm remembering some of this. I remember that someone joined mid-tournament, and that was a little bit weird.
It was their jungler River, I think. Or maybe it was their mid laner Tank. I don't remember. But
yeah, who the hell knows?
Unified's playing, and for the most part, from what I've heard out of like the PCS, like he's supposed to be the best player in the league, or if not, like the second best player in the league. So I guess that's good for them.
Okay, and what else we got?
Next up, the draw show, which is normally I think supposed to happen around this time. I've seen no news about that at all, and it does feel like nobody really knows when it's going to happen because I did some like extensive looking to try to find out when it was going to be. So like you said, Maybe they're on the ropes a little bit here.
Certainly would. Yeah, exactly. Like they're probably trying to cram a bunch of stuff and get a bunch of stuff done. The last year they came out with a whole video about how the world's groups were going to work and all this stuff. I'm sure that's going to be released soon, as well as what the pooling system is going to look like. Is it official that Rogue got pushed? Is that like official,
Yeah.
or is that like a rumor?
Mm-hmm. That's
Okay,
official.
so that's something that they've got as well, and so they're figuring stuff out. I did see on Leaguepedia that the pools, they say that nothing is official yet on Leaguepedia, anyways, for what that's worth. So we'll have to see if they decide. My guess is they'll just go to what they did last year. Last year worked pretty well. I don't
Mm.
see why you would change uh, from what you did last year, considering it's all the same regions that are going and same number of seeds, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's how that's going to work, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes.
Yeah. So kind of just to piggyback off of that, we did get an update from the VCS. They kind of made an official statement. I want to say like just over a week ago, or they basically just said, the VCS is unable to compete in Worlds 2021 because they're still pretty heavy on the COVID restrictions over there. So the teams, they just can't travel to Worlds. And if people didn't know, they didn't actually have a summer split in the VCS. Like there was no summer split. They didn't play
Yeah,
any
so
games.
who the hell knows who would have qualified? You can't qualify if there's no games.
Yeah, and there was a Reddit post that Levi put out. If you don't know who Levi is, he's on Gigabyte Marines, and he's I would say one of the most famous players in the VCS. He kind of like he was on the first Gigabyte Marines roster that kind of like put them on the map back in season 7 at MSI and then at Worlds 2017. But he basically just put out this Reddit post saying like it kind of sucks to like continue to try hard and play solo queue for like 3 months when there's no split going on and there's no word whether or not there is going to be one, or even if you can make Worlds, because Gigabyte Marines at the time were like one of the favorites to attend Worlds. And so it kind of sucks for all the players and whatnot that they're not able to attend, and kind of all their hard work was for nothing.
Pretty much.
But I
That
mean,
honestly, that just sucks. If you're a
yeah,
fan, okay, if you're a fan of the VCS, not only are you disappointed that they're not going to Worlds, but like they've had to cancel splits and stuff like that. Like people think it's the LCS is having a rough time right now, and the LCS is because viewership is like slowly falling off and whatnot. I imagine to restart up the VCS is probably going to be really difficult after not doing a full split, not going to Worlds. Like that's how you take air out of your tires right there. Like that just sucks.
yeah, and at the same time, like I kind of said this in the past, like after Worlds 2020 happened and then after MSI happened, like while I do think that the system that was in place last year was a good system in terms of the adjusted play-in format where they split it into 2 groups of 5 teams instead of 4 groups of 3 teams, and then they kind of elevated one of the play-in teams to a main stage team, it kind of like ended up working out. But I still am kind of like disappointed that there was no backup plan in place, because with there being no VCS summer split, like we knew that there was no summer split was going on like back when summer split started in June. And I feel like if Riot if they would have wanted to, they could have made some sort of amendment to include more teams from other regions, because it feels like from the community standpoint, like that's what people would have preferred. So maybe we'll get some note from Riot if that was an option they even considered, or if they just knew from the get-go that they were just going to use the same system last year should the VCS not be able to compete. But I would be pretty disappointed if Riot never even gave that any consideration to kind of adjust the format should the VCS not be able to compete, without just like copy pasting the same thing from last year. Because in my opinion, it felt like it was just a bit of a happy accident the way that last year kind of worked out with the groups and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, if anyone like you mentioned that we didn't see any news about when the group draw thing is, but if anyone
I
has seen something,
I am.
let us know.
It's just like I was looking at it for like 30 minutes. Like I found nothing.
Yeah, I scrolled through all of Reddit over the last month. Like I was saying, like I don't freaking know. There's been no news on it as far as I know. But if anyone sees anything like that, let us know, and we'll probably talk about that in our next episode if they do it before then.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that happens. Anything before we get into the world's tier list?
No, I think we'll get into
Let's get
those.
into it. Yeah, I wanted to see yours. I saw it for like a split second before, but I didn't get to catch. Ah, okay. I saw before. The only thing that I saw is that you only had 2 teams in the S plus tier list, and then it
Hmm.
disappeared.
Hmm.
so I couldn't see it.
So what do you think is the easiest way to go about this? Do you want to go just by group, or do you want to go by region, or do you want to like?
Let's do tier by tier, because for our listeners that can't see it, I think it'll be way too much to digest if I were to just list off your whole tier list and then you were to list off all of mine.
Okay.
So I think we should just go tier by tier. Should we start from the bottom and work our way up?
Yeah, I think it makes it a bit easier.
Okay, so for me, I pretty much had all of the wild card teams at the bottom if I didn't know anything about them. So I had Infinity, Unicorns of Love, Red Canids. Am I saying that right? I don't know who this team is. I don't even know what the other one is. I can't even. The logo's too small for even read. And then I know that dragon thing is the Australian team.
Yeah,
I think it's Peace.
I
Is it
think
Peace?
yes, it's peace.
Anyways, guys, I'm saying I don't know anything about these teams except I guess we did see UOL and Infinity at MSI. Nothing too impressive for me to not put them in F tier. The other ones I just know nothing about, and so I put them in F tier.
Yeah. For me, I had. Well, I guess did you say that you didn't put Detonation Focus Me? That was the only playing team.
No,
Okay, so
right. I did not
yeah.
put them there.
So for me, I had every single minor region slash emerging region team in there. Definitely did consider not having Detonation Focus Me in there and bumping them up a tier, but it just feels like compared to the rest of the talent across the board everywhere, like if there was like a E tier, I'd have them in E by themselves because I think they're probably the best play-in team out of all the play-in teams listed, but not to like put them equivalent with any other teams. Like they would be in their own E tier, but who the hell says like there's no E. It goes S A B C D F. Like there's no E. So sorry, you're an F.
Yeah, I guess so. So I guess we should just hop up to the D tier then. I did put Detonation Focus Me in the D tier. I put them along with Cloud9. Now, the reason why I put DFM above is because of what we saw at MSI. They were the one of those teams that actually looked decent as far as in the pool of the other teams that we put in F. They just stood out to me as being better than those, and so I think I had to push them up one. And because Cloud9 was the only other team that I had in D tier, it was like, well, are they on Cloud9's tier? Maybe, maybe not. But I
They
think they're
beat them.
definitely above the tier. They're definitely above the tier of all the other all the other teams that we just mentioned in F, and so that's why I put them in D. I think that they were actually having good games against teams like Cloud9, like Damwon, and like those are teams that if you can beat them, you're not an F tier.
Yeah, I mean you're right. They did put up good showings in their two games against Damwon. Didn't actually pull out a win against them, but kind of pushed them to their limit.
Yeah.
They did end up taking win off Cloud9, but they did also lose to Infinity. So it kind of like ruined their little mini miracle run at MSI. And it's just like, I don't know. It's hard to see. I feel like we will get a pretty clear picture of what level this team is at in the playing stage. Because, like, for example, if team were to like just smash their way through playing stage, then I would really have no problem with bumping them up a tier. But just with not seeing them play at all, them also, not really. I mean, they put up a good showing in terms of performance up against at MSI, but like they never really like finished the job. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. Do you want to talk about Cloud9 now, or do you want to wait until C tier for you?
we can
Because
talk
you've
about
got
C9 now.
so
Actually,
I just
hold
cannot.
on. We shouldn't because I feel like it'll make a lot more sense for. No, let's not. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so who do you want to talk about right now then? Do you want to go with Beyond Gaming, who have you got in D?
Yeah, so I have Beyond Gaming in my D tier. You have
Mm-hmm.
them in your B tier.
Yes.
And
Now, go ahead.
okay, well, actually, you go ahead because I'm going to counter what you're going to say because I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say here. I haven't watched the region, and I'm gonna be clear about this, guys. The only thing that I could go off of the PCS is based off what we saw at MSI, and that's where PSG Talon actually looked like a good team. And so my judgment of Beyond Gaming is not from watching them play. I need you guys to know that. I don't want to pretend to know how good or not good this team is. All I know is that they took PSG to 5 games twice at the end of summer. And so for me, I had to put them just one tier below PSG. And all of my PSG knowledge is strictly from MSI. So I thought if they take them to 5 games twice, and I think they beat them the one time
Yeah, they
actually.
did.
they can't be that different is how I looked at it, and so that's why I actually put Beyond Gaming up in B, but you put them all the way down in D.
Yes. And while I think your argument is a completely fair argument, I kind of went, since I didn't really know the team that well, other than their 80 carry Doggo, who I think is actually very, very good from seeing him at
Mhm.
MSI, my main reasoning for putting them in D is more based on like the history of the LMS slash PCS at Worlds. Because, from what we know of PSG Town, they've been a very, very dominant team within the PCS. And that's no story in the LMS because before it became the PCS, it was the LMS. Pretty much you had two teams that dominated the whole league the entirety of its existence, which were AHQ in the early days with like Westor and I don't know what that other guy's name was, their top laner, but he was a pretty prolific guy. And then Flash Wolves after that. And those were pretty much always like basically how the PCS has played out within the last year and a half is how the LMS always played out, where one team would beat everybody else, and there'd be that second team that could kind of contend with them, but never really got over that hump. And just to like bring up some history right here, in the last 5 World Championships, I know like this isn't like obviously then is not now, and I totally understand that. But
Yeah,
in
go ahead.
In Worlds 2016, both LMS teams didn't get out. In Worlds 2017, the team in play-ins didn't get out, and both main stage teams didn't get out of groups. In Worlds 2018, all 3 teams didn't make it out of groups. Worlds 2019, all 3 teams didn't make it out of groups. And in Worlds 2020, both teams didn't make it out of groups. And in the majority of these cases, the number 2 seed out of this region was often going, ZZ Tai, yes, thank you. That guy's a beast. And more often than not, the number 2 seed from the LMS slash PCS was always going 1-5 or 0-6. So like I said, I don't know a whole lot about this team, but based on history with the number 1 team from that region will usually always overperform and beat everybody, and the second team can kind of get close, and you think like, oh, maybe there's some competition. At Worlds, just history says that they're not going to be that good.
So wait, then why is PSG all the way up in A? Their number 1 seed does well, you're saying?
Yeah.
I see. But we know that they took them to 5 games twice.
Maybe we did, and that's happened before, like many, many times in the whole AHQ Flash Wolves thing. Like when AHQ was popping off, Flash Wolves would be right behind them, almost beat them. And then when Flash Wolf became the dominant team, like AHQ was right behind, almost beat them. But
Yeah.
then that second team would never show up.
I think we can both agree that we don't really know much about this team, and so I don't think either one of us wants to pretend that we are experts on them. So yeah, I mean, what can I
Yeah.
say? Sure.
Yeah,
B
like
tier,
again,
fine.
I
B
like
tier, fine.
I don't even think I can name any other player on this team that's not Doggo.
I
But
cannot. So there you go. Uh, let's move on to C tier then, right?
yeah, and then we'll mix in our Cloud9 talking here as well.
So okay, so well, let's start with Cloud9 then, because you've got them in the C tier. Like I said before, I have them in the D tier. Now, your C tier, for those wondering, J&T's C tier looks like this. It's Cloud9, Team Liquid, and 100 Thieves. So it's all the North American teams. So are you telling me, J&T, that despite what we've seen in summer and despite what we've seen in playoffs, you still think they're on the same level as the other 2 North American teams?
Yes.
Okay, tell me why.
Well, I just feel like the way that the playoffs happened, it was just whatever team played better on that day won. And that's not like something that's surprising at all.
Like what it always is.
Well, I know, but would you also not agree with like if any team could beat any team? Like like I think any team in the 5.
That's a vague statement.
Oh, it's a vague
Any
statement, but
team
I think
can beat any team, but should they? I wouldn't say they. I wouldn't say Cloud9 should beat Team Liquid or 100 Thieves. I would say 100 Thieves and Team Liquid should beat Cloud9 based off what we've seen for the last 3 or 4 months.
yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to say other than that. For me, I just think NA is kind of in its own area where they're better than all the bad teams, but they're bad teams being playing teams, but they're not as good as the rest of the world. And it's just hard for me to put any of them above any EU, LCK, LPL teams or put them below any other playing teams. And I just think that the way that they like, I mean, yeah, obviously, I think most people will say like, yeah, Cloud9 did look like shit. I don't know. I don't think they looked as shit as most people say in that 100 Thieves series because they should have won 3 out of the 4 of those games if they don't make these like, if Zen doesn't get caught out twice. Like, I think they probably win that series.
I think people that have been sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I just think the finals weekend could have played out any number of ways with any team being 1, 2, or 3, and I wouldn't have been surprised at all.
Yeah, I still say that I would have been surprised with Cloud9 winning just with how bad they looked. People that have listened to our show know exactly what I'm going to say, and so it's like, ugh, I hate repeating myself, but here we go. Um, yeah, I don't think Cloud9's a good team. Yes, they can look good and blah 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 blah, and they have this high ceiling and blah blah blah. Like I've said it a million times. Like yes, they can, but they haven't. They just haven't. They've looked bad for like 3 months now. They've had a couple of good games. Not enough for me to put them on the same level as 100 Thieves and Team Liquid. To me, if they were to face off against those teams, I think that 100 Thieves and Team Liquid are definitely favorites against Cloud9 until we see otherwise. Yes, I know that Cloud9 has a high ceiling. I'm not denying that. But from what I've seen, there's just no way in hell I personally could put them in the same tier. Sorry for repeating myself. I feel like people listening to us are going to be like, man, Blue Jay says this every fucking week. But that's my thoughts. And so I couldn't put them in the C tier. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I will kind of like reiterate a little bit. I feel like if there were more like I don't want to say if there were more tiers, because if there were more tiers, like we should just rank them like 1 through 22. But like I do think like if there were a few more tiers, I think the only team, like the only NA team that I would separate above the others would be to put 100 Thieves ahead of the other two.
Hmm. Wait, what? Now, wait, you think 100 Thieves is better than Team Liquid and Cloud9?
I said, well, if I had to remove one team away from the group, I would move 100 Thieves up one. Yes.
So that's not surprising because I think you're wrong. That's surprising because I just thought that I don't know, you've been pretty vocal that you didn't really think 100 Thieves was that good of a team from what we did in our last episode. So that's why I'm a little bit
Well,
surprised.
it's more that like I mean, I'm kind of giving like I think in the majority of scenarios, we're kind of giving a lot of these teams the benefit of the doubt. Like we're not going into Worlds saying, "Oh yeah, this team is going to be absolute dog shit, not do anything." Like we're thinking that all of these teams are going to come in with some level of success. And from what we've seen, like when 100 Thieves plays well, they're actually a really good team. But what I would say is they often, in the majority of the summer split, did not play well after the first 3 weeks of the regular season. Big drop off, not big drop off, but continual drop off to then playoffs where they actually played very well towards the end. I'm just, like I said, my reservations about 100 Thieves were because they looked so good at that time and we hadn't seen that since then. But even if you were to like take 100 Thieves at 75% of what they played in the finals, I think they're still really good.
So a good question in the live chat that I want to address, because someone says, have you guys taken into account the meta shift? And we haven't done that yet because I don't believe, first of all, the meta continues to shift all the time. Like we don't see it right now, but the meta is probably shifting in scrims as we speak, and we don't have any information on the scrims happening right now. Maybe Dom and LS have that kind of information. We don't. So for me, I did not take into account meta. I've taken into account what I've seen from the last time I've seen the teams play. And so with the PCS, for example, the last time I saw them play was MSI. So the PCS teams on here, it's like, okay, what did I see at MSI? That's how I'm ranking them. And then last time I saw the North American teams were just like 2-3 weeks ago. And so mostly going off of that. So just to be clear, and I appreciate the question in the live chat.
Yeah, what I would say to that is like guys like Dom and LS can do that. Like they can predict what they think the meta will be. We have no idea what the meta would be. Like what you could say the meta might be at Worlds will be some version of this meta, including the patch 11.18 changes and 11.19 changes. Like we can predict what's going to happen. Like, but we have no idea what's going to happen. Like,
yeah,
I'm not gonna compare teams to what we perceive the meta is going to be until we actually see some form of meta in plans. Like I think we can get a very accurate picture of what the meta will look like with plans, specifically with the the respective champions. Like again, complete hypothetical, but if this meta in plans completely turns into like super supportive tank junglers, I think you're definitely gonna increase those teams who have really good macro level junglers on their team, like I don't know, players like Tarzan, players like Canyon, like those are players I think would benefit much more from that sort of supportive macro style jungle. But if we're gonna have like a complete hard farm carry sort of jungle meta like we saw at Worlds 2020, you're definitely gonna put those higher up players like your Inspireds, your who else I'm trying to think of, your Ways from RNG, your TNs from FPX, there's a whole bunch of different number of ways that this can go, and I feel like trying to predict the meta is just like another layer on like some shit that we have no clue what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I think it would be way too much guessing
Yeah.
if we were going meta based. So, but yeah, anyways, appreciate the question.
But it's a fair
So
point.
I mentioned what J&T's C tier was. I just wanted to mention what mine is. So I had 100 Thieves, Team Liquid, and Hanwha Life. So let's continue. Let's finish talking about the North American teams. Did you have anything else on 100 Thieves or TL, J&T? Because we talked a little bit about Cloud9. Anything specific on those two North American teams that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, and if we're gonna talk about like if we're gonna talk about how great 100 Thieves played in finals weekend, and that's why they're going in as any number one, like we also got and we also did talk about how C9 has been underperforming. Got to talk about how awful Team Liquid played in the finals, and I don't
No,
think we're expecting to see that version of Team Liquid at Worlds, and
no.
we're expecting some consistency out of them from their star players like Alfari, like Jensen, like Core JJ. Worlds 2020 for Team Liquid for me is probably going to be about how Tactical and Santorin can kind of stand up to the rest of the pack, because I think we're, especially at this Worlds, we're going to have a lot of really good 80 carries. Like, just to throw some names off the top of the head, like we're going to have guys like Teddy and Gumayushi. We have guys like Karzi. We have guys like Unified. We have guys like Ruler. We
Ruler.
have guys like Deft. We have guys like Upset. We have guys like Ansama. Like, there are so many
The
good
list
80s.
goes on.
And
Yeah.
that's not even like dude, like oh my god. Like, there's so many like, I think 80 carry is like probably one of the strongest groups at Worlds in terms of like just straight up like players, in terms of how many good ones there are. And my main worry for Team Liquid is going to be Tactical. And I think for the rest of the TL roster, like, we're expecting them to come in more of what their later form in summer looked like. They're like their week 8, week 9 early playoffs, than just the shit show that they put out in the finals.
Yeah, and I think that if you're a Team Liquid fan, you should be worried about what you saw in finals. However, that is not the end of the world, because I do want to remind people that Team Liquid looked good for most of playoffs. Yes, they stumbled at the end, and yes, that's something to be concerned about. But it is not, to me, it's not nearly as bad as what we saw out of Cloud9. So I'm not as worried for Team Liquid. I still think that they have a good team top to bottom. So I still think that they're a good North American team, and if you're a good North American team, you're usually going to come in on this tier list around C. If they played well in finals, Team Liquid, and they won, there's a good chance I would have had them in the B tier, but probably not. I don't think I can do that with just how bad they looked in a series that obviously mattered a lot. Because I mean, sometimes pressure gets to people. I don't know if that's what happened here, but we do know that they didn't look good in their final series, and so I couldn't bump them up to a B.
Yeah, they looked pretty bad.
Yeah, and
Though
then 100.
I could see the argument if they would have won. Like, even if they didn't even look that good, but if they just won, like, they might be B.
Well, and what's interesting is that when I was doing this tier list, first of all, I looked at this thing for a long time and I kept moving a bunch of shit around, but I kept thinking, like, would I put 100 Thieves as a better team than Team Liquid? And I kept going back and forth on yes and no, yes and no. I still don't know. And so obviously 100 Thieves goes in the same tier with them if I can't keep up my, or make up my mind rather, on which team I think is better. Let's remind people of how much of a beast Closer was in these playoffs, man. This guy was absolutely smurfing.
Yeah.
And so there could be the argument that they should be in B tier. I'm not there yet because we saw some inconsistency towards the end of summer split, but 100 Thieves looked really good at the end of playoffs, and Closer looked like an absolute smurf, man. He looked so fucking good. So
But
I
Viego
wouldn't
is
be upset.
nerfed.
I wouldn't be
So,
upset. I mean, still, he looked good all
I know he
split
did.
long.
His
He
Lee
looked
Sin
good
was
on
also really good.
his Lee Sin was amazing. His Diana's good. His Olaf is good. So I'm not worried about champ pool as far as Closer's concerned and the Viego being nerfed. If I saw someone put 100 Thieves in the B tier, I don't think I would be upset. I wouldn't agree with it, but I wouldn't be upset. I'd probably say, okay, I could see that. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then the last team in the C tier for me is Hanwha Life. Now they looked really good towards the end, but for me the reason why I struggle so much with this team is like, okay, guys, they have Chovy. A lot of people are still saying Chovy's the best mid laner in the world. That could be argued because he actually did struggle a little bit. But some people are saying, well, when you're on a bad team, it's hard to look good, and that's true. But then there's also like his CS numbers are always insane. I don't know. This guy just doesn't miss any farm and is always, well, styling on people because he's just outlaning them. So I can't forget that, but I also can't forget that they did not look good for a lot of summer. Like, this team hasn't really looked good most of this year. And so I had a really hard time with Hanwha Life as well.
They weren't that bad
But
in spring.
I
They
had to
were,
put
they
them
were,
in C.
yeah. As most people know, I'm a big Hamo Life guy. Yeah, Chovy is
It's a miracle
basically
run for you.
Chovy's basically playing like Showmaker was in late 2020, early 2021, where he doesn't miss CS. He just like hits every skill shot, and his laning is just like completely flawless. And that's pretty much what he did. I watched, I would say, 75% of Hamo Life's games throughout the year. Maybe not the full VODs, but a lot of highlights of what was going on. Although I did watch all of their VODs from their week 9 of LCK and all their gauntlet. And look, they look really, really good. The main problem for Hama Life for the majority of the split was they were never really able to decide on what jungler they were going with and kind of what top laner they were going with, but they've really kind of settled on Morgan and Willer. Willer was like a very late acquisition for them. I don't know if he was exactly brought up from their trainee squad or anything like that, or if they just brought him in, but this guy is also a guy who has really started to perform on a lot of these carry junglers, like the Viego, like the Diana. He's been looking very good. Morgan is also looking really, really good. One thing that we're seeing in the LCK that we're not seeing elsewhere is Kennen, and he's been spamming a lot of Kennen in like pro games, and
We saw a little bit of Kennen in other regions. Did we see it in Europe? Now I'm trying to remember
no,
where
I
I
don't
saw
think
some
so.
Kennen.
I don't remember seeing Kennen ever in the EU.
I thought Ottawamne played it. Maybe he
Maybe
didn't. I
one
don't know.
game. I don't know.
Anyways, yeah, I love to see some Kennen, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't argue with seeing Kennen. The other thing, maybe you mentioned it? Did I miss you mentioning Deft? Because he had a pretty good playoff.
Well, I haven't mentioned him yet, but yeah,
Oh,
Deft
my bad.
has been playing really, 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 really well. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it does feel like Han was like finally settled on their roster with Morgan and Willer as like their starting junglers, and Jovi's really good, obviously, and then as Blue Jay just mentioned, Deft feels like he's back to being Deft again.
Yeah, he's looked pretty good as of late. Another reason why this was really difficult to put them somewhere. Now, I think we should transition to the B tier because you had them in the B tier, right? So why don't you list off your B tier for our listeners?
So for my B tier, as just mentioned, I have Hama Life, LNG, Fnatic, and Rogue.
And me, I had Fnatic, Rogue, Beyond Gaming, and LNG. Now, we don't need to talk about Beyond Gaming. We already talked about them. Where do you want to start with this one?
I think we'll go LNG first quickly because I feel like this is the team from all of the major regions that both of us know the least about.
Yes.
Yeah, other than the obvious thing that Tarzan is really, really good.
Yeah, we're not going to sit here and pretend dude, how cringe is that?
I gotta correct myself. I really gotta correct myself because I said Tarzan and not Tarzan.
Yeah, I caught that earlier. I was gonna let it slide.
I really had to correct myself there.
I knew who you meant. Yeah. Anyways, what I was gonna say is, it actually drives me nuts when people pretend to know what they're talking about when they haven't watched anything. That shit drives me nuts. And so we are not gonna do that to you guys. I've watched maybe 1 or 2 games of LNG this year, not enough to have an informed opinion. So it's kind of a guess for the LNG, and that's why I put them in B. I'm not going to sit here and waste your guys' time with a bunch of analysis that I don't know anything about.
Yeah, same thing for me. It's more kind of just following the overall perception of how people are viewing this team, and that they are really good because they did have a very strong summer playoffs run. I'm not saying that because I watched the game. I'm just saying that because that's what I saw when I was checking the LPL schedule and results and whatnot. But I think Tarzan is expected to be a very, key person for this team at Worlds. Feels like they're probably going to live and die by him, I would assume. So we hope that the meta is good for Tarzan.
Yeah. Tarzan.
Whatever. Tarzan.
No, it's Tarzan. It's Tarzan, I promise. I'm just fucking.
No, it is.
Okay. Let's go Rogue and Fnatic now. Where do you want to start there?
Yeah, it's just very interesting because these two teams played each other in the quote-unquote semifinals of LEC playoffs. It's not really semifinals; it's like losers finals. But
yeah,
it did
like a second, third kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
It did feel like Rogue kind of fell off super hard during playoffs because I think people expected this team to be the favorite going into playoffs, either them or Mad Lions. I would say. I think G2 was like starting to get there because they had a really good back half of the split. And people were thinking, oh, maybe G2's back. Maybe they're going to be good. But like the more safe option, I think, was Rogue. And they didn't look very good in their last 2 series to end playoffs against Mad Lions and then against Fnatic. But it really is hard to count out Rogue and like say they're a bad team after.
Yeah, you just can't.
Yeah, they dominated the regular seasons in both spring and summer. they should have won spring finals against Mad Lions if they don't like get reverse
Coulda, woulda,
sweep.
shoulda.
I know, but
Yeah.
like it's just hard to ignore like the body of work that they had apart from 3 series where they just looked awful. Well, not and they didn't even look awful in one of them. They just had a massive throw, but did look really bad against in summer against Mad Lions and against Fnatic. And on the flip side with Fnatic, like they didn't look that solid either. In spring split, the
No.
whole the Whippo role swap, Adam came in. They popped off early on, and then they like hit this big dip in the middle of the season and started turned it on towards the end, and then made like the miracle lower bracket run. So I feel like it's really hard to judge these two teams because, you know, who knows? Like maybe it's kind of like NA situation. Like we play the series again, and Rogue just 3-0s them, and
I want to start with Rogue for me because I still am not giving up on this team. So as you mentioned, they should have won spring. To me, I said this before and during MSI that I thought Rogue was the best team in Europe, and I still think that was the case at that time. I don't anymore because they've looked a little bit worse. But I'm not giving up on this team. I still think they're too fucking good, man. I think Inspired, Larson, and Hans Sama are just absolute beasts. And that's nothing against Trimby or Odoamne. I just think that those 3 players are at the top of their role in that league. And they've
the
had
top
some...
of their role. You think those
What's
3
that?
players are the best 3 players in their role?
Maybe. I towards the top is what I'm trying to say. But anyways, they're there. They're in the conversation for sure, no doubt. They're absolutely insane. So that's why I couldn't put them below Fnatic, even though they lost to Fnatic. And I actually wanted to put them in A, but I couldn't do it just because how they've looked lately. It's like the same kind of argument with Cloud9. Cloud9 has not looked good lately, so I couldn't put Cloud9 above D. Same thing goes for Rogue here, but I have a little bit more faith in Rogue because I think that they've just looked, well, I don't know, they've just looked better straight up, and I think they just have the star power in those roles. Yeah, anyways, I still think that this team is better than Fnatic. I might eat my words on that a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. This team's good. I still think this team even has a chance to win Worlds. I'll go out and say that.
That is a bit of a statement there.
Yeah, I know. That's probably a hot take, but
That is a burning hot take, I would say.
I don't have them as a favorite. I do not, but I definitely won't be surprised if we see Rogue there at the end because I still think this team's really fucking good.
Wow, I'm still like trying to process that. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Okay, here's something that you'll probably disagree with. I think putting Cloud9 on the same tier as 100 Thieves and Team Liquid is crazier than thinking Rogue can win Worlds.
Yeah, that I know you're just trolling.
I'm not trolling. Well, okay, here's the thing. You need to I should be more clear in how I say this because can win Worlds is really fucking vague, right? I should say a respectable, so probably somewhere in the range of like 2 to 5% chance of winning Worlds, somewhere in between there. Whereas like I don't think Cloud9 is in that at all. So yeah. All the North American teams together, I would probably give 1 or 2% for any one of the 3 teams in North America. And even that might be generous. So I'd probably give Rogue somewhere in the 2 to 5% range.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then Fnatic. I mean, people know what I think of Fnatic. Dude, I fucking love watching Fnatic, man. They're so fun to watch. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're an amazing team, although I do think they're a good team. This team is just absolutely, they go ham. And I love that. And I think that's actually a strength as well. I'm always saying how being the proactive team is a strength. Just because sometimes they run it down does not mean that what they're doing is necessarily troll in their play style. They play aggressive. Sometimes you're going to get punished. That's just how it works. Fnatic plays really, really aggressive. And even though we've seen Hylissang int many times over the years with his aggressive play, I think lately his aggressive play has paid off way more than it's hurt them. And so I think that it's just such a strength right now. And we saw their bot lane looked really good last year at Worlds as well, for what that's worth.
Yeah, I think the way that Upset and Hylissang are playing right now is pretty on par with how Reckless and Hylissang were playing last year. And I said this in Worlds 2020. I thought that Reckless and Hylissang were the best bot lane in the world at Worlds 2020. They were absolutely smacking everybody from like Life and Ruler to Jackie Love and I forget who their support was on Top Esports. I forget his name. Uyanja, I think.
Oh yeah, man.
They absolutely they lost in the quarterfinals against Top Esports, but they were like absolutely bending them over and they looked
That
really,
game,
really good
that series
against.
went 5, right? If I
Yeah, it
remember
did.
right.
I even
Yeah.
predict. I just want to throw this in there. I predicted
Oh,
a 5-game series in
pat
that
yourself
series.
on the back.
Yeah, I will. Thank you very much. But they absolutely smack daddied every bot lane they played against, and I feel like Uptet and Hylissang can do the same. The main thing for Fnatic for me is if Niski can sort of hold up and play as well as he was in playoffs.
Yeah, Niski's looked really good lately. I guess we also got to give a shout out to Bwipo because coming into the year, that role swap was a question mark, right? I mean, there's the whole range of him being really, really good, all the way to him being absolutely bad, because you don't know what to expect out of a good player like Bwipo transferring to a just jungle is not a role he's ever played at pro play, so you don't know what to expect. I think he's looked really good for pretty much most of the year. And so you really gotta give props to Bwipo for that. That's kind of crazy that you can swap roles like that and not stand out in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right,
Um,
I feel like we should move up to the A tier now.
yeah, let's get to the A tier. So what we have the same in A tier, JNT has Mad Lions, PSG, and Genji. I have Mad Lions, Genji, T1, and PSG. So the only difference is I added T1 into my A tier. So let's start with the stuff that we have in common. I guess since we're on the Europe topic, let's start with Mad Lions. For shame on you and me for not putting them in S tier, right, JNT?
They're not S tier. Sorry, I said it. Mad
Well,
Lions
a
is
lot
not
of
an S
people
tier.
think they are. So
That's
so
fair.
here's the thing. I don't think they are S tier. But again, this is one of those where if I saw someone put them in S tier, I wouldn't be like, "Oh no, how could you do that?" I just personally don't think that they're on the level of your we'll get to them later, but of your top world's teams. So I couldn't put them there, but I will say I'm still really impressed with this team's macro. That is the thing that has stood out to me the most. When you're out macroing G2 like really, really hard, that was a sign for me that this team is good and you can't fuck around with Mad Lions. So um, yeah, I can't sleep on this team. They're good. They won the LEC for a reason, twice actually for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Don't sleep on them. Do not sleep on them.
Yeah. It feels like for Mad Lions, it feels like the same sort of questions as Worlds 2020 will be for 2021. Like, can their jungler be as good as he was in the LEC at Worlds? Because I feel like the same storyline going towards last time was like, oh my god, Shadow is really, really insane, playing like probably the best jungler in the
Oh,
league, and like, can he do the same thing? And for me, I think I have more confidence in Elioya because he has sort of like pretty much from the time he entered the league, he's been playing like one of the best, if not the best. Right now, I would call him the best jungler in the LEC. But just apart from him, I mean, I think all around the board, their team is much, much better. Their top laner, Armut, is so much better than Arome. Their mid laner, Humanoid, is still super, super good. And Karzi and Kaiser, I think, they kind of proved at MSI that they're not chokers and they actually can compete against some of the best bot lanes in the world. They put up really, really good performances against Damwon's bot lane in MSI semifinals. And it's just more like I'm going into Worlds 2020 with more confidence in their other roles, but the same questions in jungle, which I would argue at Worlds especially is the most important role in the game.
you made a bunch of thoughts go through my head there. One, dude, I forgot about Shadow. That was
Dude,
I
yeah.
loved he was great, but then he did not look very good at Worlds and he fell off really, really hard.
He
And
did not look good. He looked really bad. How about
yeah, and the thing is,
like
you're
inting
right that
bad?
like Elioya has looked so much better. And I think that's one of the areas where why this team looks so much better is because their jungle is a lot more consistent. So that's one, but also I would say Humanoid has actually stepped up and looked a lot
Yeah.
better. I think his summer has been a lot better than spring. That makes his spring sound bad. It wasn't bad. It really wasn't. But I think he's just so much more reliable in summer that I think this team got a little bit better, and that's why I wouldn't put like I mentioned before, I thought Rogue was the best team in spring. I think a big part of me thinking Mad Lions is the best team is because of Humanoid. And then you mentioned Armut. Armut, that guy's a beast. Love
Yeah,
him.
that'll be fun.
He's a rock in the top lane.
And he played
Yeah.
really well. He played really well at Worlds 2020 on a
Yes, he
playing
did.
team in Supermassive against teams like Mad Lions and against
Yeah.
Team
Yeah.
Liquid and whatnot.
Yeah, that was where he stood out a lot
Hmm.
last year. We became quick fans of his. Yeah. Anyways, he's a player to watch as well. He's fun guy to watch. Um, who should we go to next?
We'll do Genji, I think.
Okay, let's do Gen G. My boys.
Your boys.
My boys Gen G have stumbled across the finish line to end the split. I
I
believe
think
I
that's a
was
good
reading
way to
some
summarize
rumors.
it.
Yeah, I believe I was reading some rumors about uh I don't God, I don't even want to say because I don't remember exactly even what I was reading, but it sounded like not everything was all like um
There was some
good.
turmoil.
There was, yeah, maybe that kind of, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it didn't sound like everything was sunshine and rainbows between the players. Now,
Mm.
obviously, I have no actual information on that. These are just rumors that you read from Reddit, of course, the greatest source in the world. But it's not something you want to hear from a team that's struggling. It's probably usually that's accurate. If there's a team that's struggling, usually guys aren't too happy with each other, and there's a lot of frustration that happens. I still think Gen G's a good team. I could not put them in S or S plus at all because of their stumbles, but I need to remind people they've got some absolute studs. BDD has had a great year. Ruler is an amazing 80 carry. That guy's nuts. And so those are the two guys that I think you need to look to pick things back up for Gen G and get them back in. You can't count this team out either, despite the fact that they've looked worse in summer than they did in spring.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even looking at summer split, like, throughout the majority of the season, the only team that they were worse than was Damwon. Like for the most part, Genji was still looking pretty solid. Their playoffs didn't really go their way. They took a bit of a smacking to T1. But I still, personally, I think Genji will play good. They'll play well at Worlds. I think individually, they have the players to match up against any and all of the other top players at Worlds. I think, you obviously are going to have your, like, super standout guys, like your Showmakers, your Doinbees, your whatever. But, like, dude, BDD is no pushover. That guy's really, really good. Clid is really, really good.
And
Ruler is
Syndra's
really,
strong right
really
now.
good. Life
Syndra's
is still
strong.
pretty good when he's not taking no flash supports. World's
I need
2020
to remind people
flashbacks.
that BDD is one of the best Syndras in the world, if not the best. He might not be the best at any other champion, although he's still good at like Azir and stuff like that. His Syndra is absolutely disgusting, and I will take that to the grave.
Mhm.
I think his Syndra is insane, and that's a champion that will be meta. And so, I mean, that's just one champ. So that's a little bit of copium, if you will, but you can't ignore it. And so there's some things that can happen for Gen G to look good, but they're definitely going to need to turn things around because if they can continue to play the way they did in summer, I don't really think this team has a shot for Worlds. But I'm counting on them to bounce back. There's too much talent on this team for them to be ignored.
Exactly. It feels like it's more about, like, can they come together and play well as a team? Because I think, even if they're not the greatest team, I think just individually, they'll just hard outskill a lot of the lower tier teams that they will face. And it's more about, can they come together, and then can they put it all together for those important best of fives against your EDGs, your FPXs, your damn ones, your RNGs. Like, that's where quarterfinals is where this team is we're gonna see what they're really made of, I think.
Okay, and then last up, we each have PSG in the A tier. This has to be based off MSI for you as well, right? Just want to confirm that.
Yep. I mean, the only thing that I really know, in terms of, like, the PCS, they went undefeated in the regular season, and the only games that they ever lost in playoffs were to Beyond Gaming, where they did lose once 3-2, but then beat them in grand finals 3-2. So they beat everyone except for Beyond Gaming 5 times, and they individually, what we can go off from MSI is all their players are really, really good. They're even could potentially look better because they're getting Unified back, who is unanimously one of if not the best player in the league. And, like, I feel like it's a lot of guys we kind of already know, like, they're known quantities now. It's not like we're seeing a team from I don't want to say they're not a minor region, but from a smaller major region. It's always like, oh, like, we don't really know if this guy, like, we know that these guys are good, and
They looked
they are
really good
good.
at MSI, so that's why I had to put them in A with how good they looked at MSI. They, pretty much every one of their games, maybe there was one or two exceptions, but I believe pretty much every one of their games they looked like a good team, and they were a team that you could not count out at MSI.
Yeah, even
I think,
against your RNG and your damn ones, like, they played those
yeah,
teams really, really well.
right. And so that for me is the only reason why I had to put them in A. I just there's no world where I could put them in B or lower with how good they looked at MSI. Again, very limited information, but A for me. And then for me, the last team that we had in here was T1, another team that didn't look great all year, but they started to look good towards the end of the season. They had a really good run. Uh, T1 started to ramp up, and they were not a team to really be feared towards the start of summer, but they were a team to be feared towards the end of summer. And so I think that's why J&T has them in S tier. But for me, I'm still
It's the
I
Faker
need to
Worlds buff.
it is a Faker Worlds buff. That's a fine argument,
Dude,
but
it's
I need
Faker.
to see a little bit more consistency before I were to bump them up to S. But I will admit that it went back and forth a couple of times. So, but anyways, I had them in A. You had them in S. Anything to add to the T1 talk? I'm sure you got
Um,
something to say on
well,
T1.
it is just a little bit weird because I thought at a certain point at the end of summer, it kind of felt like you thought that they were gonna pick one of Teddy and Gumayushi, but they still kind
Yeah,
of continually will rotate those players in and out, whether they're in like 1-1 in a series or in a regular season match or whatever. But the main thing for me, with T1 and a player who I thought was playing really really well towards the end of the split was Owner.
owner's been great.
He we kind of saw a little bit of Owner towards the end of summer 2020. I think it was like he's been on their trainee roster for quite a long time, and they brought him in when they were like hella changing up their roster and like a last ditch effort to make Worlds in 2020 didn't end up happening, and then he was kind of stashed on the bench for a little while, and they brought him back out in summer, and he looks really good.
Yeah, he's probably been their best player
Yeah,
as of
him or
late.
Faker.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why this team's better. But I also need to point to Kana because Kana was having
Kana's a beast. I
a
like
lot
him.
of struggles in spring, and he's been really solid as of late. Um, he got a lot of flame.
He
If you were
did.
watching
Yeah.
the LCK in spring, he got a lot of flame,
Yeah, yeah.
and
No, he
honestly,
was inting.
deservedly so. Yeah, like
He's
he did
pulling
not
a
look
bit of
good,
a wonder, I think.
but he's looking a lot better now, and I think that's another reason why T1 is not struggling nearly as much. And so, I mean, if you have your players improving as the season goes on, obviously they're going to be bumped up in people's power rankings, or in this case, tier lists. And so, I think that's why we got them in S and A, even though they struggled in spring. This is still a good team, and like JNT said, and yes, it's obvious, but you got Faker on your team, and you're going to Worlds. Kind
Dude,
of scary,
it's very scary.
the Faker diff.
Hmm.
All right. Uh, for the rest of the S tier, as far as J and T is concerned, we mentioned that he's got T1. He also has RNG and Damwon. For me, I just
Hmm.
have RNG all alone in there. Um, where do we? I guess we should start with RNG because that's what we got
Yeah,
similar.
we both have RNG and S tier. They had a bit of a lackluster summer in
Start to
comparison to
summer,
start to summer.
they had
Yes.
a really good end, really good.
Yeah.
I think they went on like an eight game win streak or whatever towards the end, and then they
Yeah.
lost their last game. But in summer they were streaking and looking really really good. So yeah, I'd be afraid of RNG. I certainly would.
Yeah. I don't know, like we saw it at MSI, like this team, like everyone was kind of under the assumption that Damwon was still the team to beat at MSI, and despite Damwon's struggles against RNG in the group stage, and even Damwon's struggles in the group stage against other teams like Cloud9 and like Mad Lions, and Mad Lions even taking them to 5 games in the semifinals match, like everyone was like, oh, like everyone still thought Damwon was gonna win, but everyone kind of recognized like, wait, RNG is still on the rise, and we did on the rise. Well, that's funny, but um,
Uh,
yeah, it's sick. RNG did win MSI. They didn't have the greatest start to summer split, but you really did see this team ramp up towards the end and even into playoffs. Like they got guys all across the board: Xiaohu, Wei, Cryan, like Gala and Ming. Like Ming is
they're all good players.
Ming. It just feels like Ming since like season 7 has always been considered like one of the best supports in the world. Xiaohu, like his role swap, like similar to Bwipa's role swap, like he's just seamlessly gone up in there and just played really, really well. And especially in the LPL where there's so many good top laners, like he just shits on people. And we saw at MSI, like that guy was absolutely destroying people in lane. I think he has probably some of the best laning, like pure laning for top laners, I would say. And I think a lot of this team's success will probably hinge on Wei, because we did see, how big of a star he was when he did kind of get the resources, get those carry style champions. But like I said, some of these teams I think will live and die by the jungle meta that we could see. And I think RNG will kind of be one of those like swing teams that like, could we see a good jungle meta for them? Like they could easily be like up there with EDG FPX.
Yeah, and as I've said to you guys many times, I don't follow the LPL that closely. I just don't really. I mean, there's too many leagues to watch for me to keep up that closely with the LPL. A lot of this for the LPL specifically is based off of what you're hearing out of these teams. You'll hear Dom talk a lot about the LPL because he covers it really closely. And from what I could tell, it seems like the LPL is definitely the best league in the world right now. The only thing is that you got Damwon, who still might be one of the best teams. I think there's a significant drop off from Damwon to the other LCK teams. Whereas with the LPL, it doesn't seem like there's a big of a drop off when it comes to EDG, FPX, and RNG. They all seem kind of up there. And so that's one of the problems that I think you have is like it's really hard to distinguish which team is the best when I believe all of these teams could beat each other. And I don't think that would surprise many people whatsoever, especially with how good RNG looked in at MSI. It would not surprise me at all to see RNG be able to beat FPX and EDG despite the hype that we've heard for those two teams, right? So I think what you've got here is you've got the LPL as a big favorite to win just because they've got three what I would call favorites, whereas the LCK seems to have one in Damwon.
But Faker.
But Faker.
Yeah. Okay. I think was that enough on RNG?
Yeah.
I say we talk about Damwon quickly because I did have them in S tier. You had them in S plus tier, and my main reasoning for having them in S tier was kind of what you were just talking about. LPL kind of being recognized as the best region in the world right now, and I think you could even say over the last 2 years, LPL supremacy is a thing. It's a thing I believe in. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for any of these teams or regions to really take down these LPL teams. Like, I would not be surprised at all if we saw 3, like RNG, FPX, and EDG take up 3 of the 4 top like spots at Worlds in terms of like play, like what happens in the knockout stage and whatnot. And that was made like it's nothing against Damwon. It's just that I think FPX and EDG are going to be that good, which is why I had them in S and not S plus.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind when I see Damwon in S. I don't think it's terrible. I still think they're an S plus team. Obviously, I wouldn't put them there, but I don't think that's like a crazy take to put them in S. And I don't mind the take that you think the LPL is better and therefore you put EDG and FPX above. I'm okay with that as well. I don't think the gap is as significant, so that's why I still had Damwon in the S plus area. I want to remind people that I think Showmaker is absolutely insane, but that's not a hot take. I think most people would agree with
Showmaker
it.
is very good. He's like still kind of he's like while his team is not as good or maybe they're not playing as well as they once were, he's still playing at that level. He is also he gets every CS, he hits all the skill shots, he doesn't make mistakes in lanes. He's still that guy.
Yeah, and I would still say that his team is still pretty damn good as well.
Oh, it is. It's just I'm just saying it's not as good as it was at Worlds 2020. That's all.
I think that's probably right. I do think you have a drop off into Khan from Nuggery. I think most people Nuggery from last year, anyways. I haven't really watched Nuggery much this year, but I think most people would agree with that. That Nuggery last year was better than Khan this year, and so I guess you have a little bit of a nerf in the top lane, but I mean, Damwon's still an amazing. Yeah, I think that you could still definitely rely on this team to be good. I will say that at MSI, I believe we saw Barrel running it down a little bit.
Oh, most definitely.
So that's something
Keep
that I
that
don't
guy
want to
off
completely.
Nautilus.
I don't want to completely discount that as well. But I mean, for most of summer, the teams looked pretty damn good. So I'm not that worried about Damwon.
Already,
The other two teams, EDG, FPX, right?
yeah, it feels like they're kind of 1A, 1B going into Worlds
Yeah.
in terms of like just pick your poison. Like I don't know, like it feels like the main talk of FPX is their top side of the map in Nuguri, Tien, and Doinby, and the big talk of EDG is their bot side with a Viper and Mako, and then also kind of you throw a Scout in there. Like he kind of
looked pretty damn
Scout
good
counts as like top side and bot side because he's the mid laner. So you know what I mean? Like for FPX, it's their top side of the map, and for EDG, it's their bot side of the map, including mid laners. Because I think Scout and Doinby, I think like I don't know. I think I would still slightly favor the LCK mid laners and Showmaker and Chovy over them, but it's like they kind of play a bit of a different style. At the same time, like Doinby's obviously got his own unique style that I don't think any other player in the world can copy. But like,
Niski
damn,
tries. He's always talking.
Yeah.
Niski's always talking about how he learns a lot from Niski, or excuse me, from Doinby. So I would put Niski in that conversation of that play style of you're trying to play very aggro and play for tempo and prio so that you can roam and help out your team set up dives and stuff like that. I would say that those two are comparable in that play style, and I think it's one of the reasons that Niski's been actually good. But I mean, that's going back to Niski again.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like both of these teams are really, really good. All their players are insane. Like, sure, like they don't even ignore like the FPX bot lane and LDBX and Crisp. Like when they won Worlds in 2019, like that was the whole thing about FPX was like, oh, well, their bot lane's not very good. Oh, yeah, well, when Worlds happens, their bot lane actually played really, really well. And same thing with Damwon. Like people thought Damwon in 2020, like, oh, their weakness is their bot lane. Oh, wait, they actually just played really insane. And Beryl was actually one of the best players on that team when Damwon was like hella smurfing Worlds. So I'm really scared for anybody who gets into a group with these two teams because it's gonna be a pounding.
Yeah, the going into finals, most people had FPX as the favorite, but it looks
Yeah.
like EDG kind of. I think that definitely stamped EDG as a favorite to win Worlds after beating FPX, because I think most people had FPX as the favorite at
I
that
don't
time.
know.
At that time, it definitely seemed like FPX is what I was hearing the most as the best team in the world. There was that Reddit post about Doinby's work ethic. I don't know when that came out, but that was something that's really been highlighted a lot. I think a lot of people have Doinby as the best player in the world at the moment, but that's a whole can of worms to get into,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of there's a lot of really good players that you could throw in that discussion. But I think right now people are probably giving it to Doinby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just Worlds is gonna be exciting.
Is
I'm
that it for the
excited.
tier list?
I think so.
Okay, so that's our tier list. That took quite a while, but we did manage to get through it. Before we move on, though, there's actually one thing that I kept meaning to talk to you about, JNT, and it just made me think about it now because we were talking about Doinby and Showmaker. So there was the rumor about Tryndamere Mid.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. I heard about
the,
that.
re- the reason why I got to bring this up is because it's so interesting to me. It sounds so troll, but yet I still believe it.
Well,
Like,
no,
okay,
well, it's not a
if you
troll. It's not a troll. It's
well,
legit.
well, that's why I say I believe it. But so hear me out here though. If you were okay for teams that have been to Worlds many times, they probably go through like, look, what do we have success with in the past, and what have we struggled with? What have been some things that have been obstacles for us? And there's probably this discussion that, man, every time we go to Worlds, I keep finding these picks in solo queue, and people just copy me, and then it becomes meta. So what you could do, and I'm not saying this is what's happening, guys. I'm just having a little fun here. What you could do is say, hey, Showmaker, if I'm Doinby, hey, Showmaker, you want to put out this rumor that Tryndamere Mid is really, really meta,
That'd
and
be a
just
huge troll.
send people on this wild goose chase into trying these picks. Like, if you would have asked me like 2 months ago, name a troll pick to become meta at Worlds, I would have been like, Tryndamere Mid, man. Like, that would be like the trollest thing, and you'd be like, haha, yeah. And here we are. Apparently,
Well,
Tryndamere Mid is this thing that is supposed to be pick ban. I don't know anything about that.
yeah.
But what are
So
your thoughts on that,
what
Jane?
I'll say about it, because there's a little bit of stuff I do know about this. Nemesis and LS have been saying for a few months now that like this is like really OP. Like I watch Nemesis stream quite a decent amount, and I watch like a lot of his YouTube videos, and he's been on the Tryndamere Mid like grind for quite a while now. And one thing that I'll also quickly reference, which you take this with a grain of salt, but Dopa, if people don't know who Dopa is, he's like the permabanned like Korean mid laner who was like basically heralded as like probably the best player of all time mechanically speaking, and like but he never got his chance to play in the LCK because they banned him for life or whatever. But the point is, he back before summer, was basically talking about how Lee Sin mid and Xin Zhao jungle were going to be like the two most broken champions in the game for all of summer. And that happened and was true. And he's also right now saying the same thing about Tryndamere Mid. There was like a Reddit post made like 2 weeks ago about this, where he was saying how like Tryndamere Mid is like supposed to be stronger than both of those combined, basically right now.
Well, I
So
think there was also a Reddit post that about Doinby talking about Tryndamere Mid at the start of
no,
summer. I think it was.
oh really? Because I remember there was a
I
recent
think
one
so.
about Tryndamere Mid, but there was also the one that Dopa put out like, or there was the clip from Dopa's stream that came out 2 weeks before all of this Tryndamere Mid stuff started happening.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw a Reddit post as I was doing my last second research. I was just looking at the top Reddit posts over the last month, and I think there was one on there talking about Doinby talking about Tryndamere Mid at the start of summer. I believe it was. Don't quote
Okay.
me on that, but I think that's what I was seeing. And so I think that Doinby's been on this hype train for a while. So why it's coming out now, I don't know. But how weird is that, right?
Yeah, I mean, regardless, like based off of all the noise we're hearing about it, like it's gotta like it's gonna be picked. Like it's gonna be picked. Like sure, it might like we might see it in plans, and it might int its face off and just like do horrible until like a lot of these other matchups that people have identified and found out and whatever. But like it's gonna get picked. Like
Unless it's the wild goose chase theory.
no, I mean maybe it's possible. I'm not gonna rule it out.
Wouldn't that be one of the like best trolls in League of Legends history? Is to just, hey, I'm this star player. I just need to grab one other star player to get on board with me of starting this rumor, just to send all the other teams off on this chase. It would be so five head.
It would be
But
funny.
yeah, like JNT's saying, I don't think it's all that
Mhm.
likely, but it would be five head though. Really would.
Mhm.
Let's get into quick news, right? Is there anything else that I'm missing?
No, that's it.
Let's do quick news.
We got a lot of quick news because we missed a week last week, so the quick
Yes.
news has piled up. One thing that was pretty major news a couple of weeks ago that isn't so much anymore, but we felt we should talk about it, is China's online gaming ban for people who are under 18. And if people don't really know what that was or what was going on, basically China, before this whole announcement, has already put in place limitations for young people. I say young people, people who are younger than 18 years old, to play video games, during the weekdays, like school days, and on the weekends, in an attempt to sort of, I guess, create, limit the amount of time people are spending online and whether they think that's a healthy lifestyle or not. Well, they basically doubled down on this almost 2 weeks ago, where they basically said that you are not allowed to play video games during the week, and you're only allowed to play 1 hour on Friday nights, Saturday nights, and Sunday nights, which
Yeah.
is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I still don't know what to think about this because I've heard mixed opinions on it. I've heard some people say like this is really going to stunt the growth of talent, and from the sounds of things it would, right, if you're not allowed to play. But then I've also heard that it's not a big deal. They'll have like they'll sign in with their parents account and they'll just lie about their age on their accounts that they make. I don't know how any of this stuff works.
Well, here,
Um,
I do know a little bit how it works. So
okay, feed me.
the big
What you
app,
got?
the big app in China that everybody uses and has like for everything is called WeChat. Like it's what
Oh,
it's
okay.
what you use to pay for stuff. It's what you use to get into stuff. It's what you use to like get on the bus. Like it's what you use. Like that is your life is that app pretty much, from what I know.
What's QQ? Do you know what QQ is? I've heard something about that as well.
I
Do you know
believe
anything about
that is another version of it or something like that. And maybe I don't know. I've heard that. I know I
So
recognize that name, but from
I'm
what I
so
know,
out of my depth here.
WeChat's the thing, and part of it is like
Okay.
you have to use that to be able to sign in and do a lot of stuff, specifically online video games. And like you kind of mentioned, like people normally just use their parents' account to sign in or lie about their age or whatever. And especially, with them kind of doubling down on it, I feel like you're kind of going to go one of two ways, where one, now everyone's just going to do this, or you actually are going to try to like limit and stunt the growth of whatnot. Because the LDO, which is basically the LPL Academy, announced that players under the age of 18 are not allowed to play on stage. And this sort of created this whole thing where like their playoffs had to get canceled and rescheduled because a bunch of teams had to use emergency substitutes because a lot of their players were like 17 or under, and it created this whole weird thing for them. And it's just really interesting, I think, to see how this changes one, like kind of the scouting and LPL player base, and how that translates to pro play, because it feels like a lot of like young Chinese talent similar to EU, that's like a big thing for them. It's like getting in their young players, getting them in at an early age, and kind of like prepping them up so when they do reach that age of 18 years old, they come into the LPL. It's like immediate stars. Like that was like the whole thing with Jackie Love when they won Worlds in 2018. Like he was on like one of those like super squad trainee rosters, came in to IG that year, and then just was like one of the best players in the world and just won.
Yeah, so here's what I'll say, because I still don't know what to think about what the results are going to be. Let's say if there's not a significant drop off as far as talent going into the LPL, everything should stay fine, and that's great. So hopefully there's no change. But if there is a significant amount of drop off of talent going into the LPL, I think this is going to affect multiple regions. I think it'll affect the LCK as well, because we've already seen the LPL start to take some players from the LCK. I think that you would see that number go up, of number of imports that the LPL gets from the LCK, if this problem persists. And so that's the worry that I have for the LCK. I don't think you're going to see any imports out of North America or LEC, or at least not a lot, maybe one or two. I don't know though,
Yeah.
but it is something to worry about as far as if I'm an LCK fan, I'm worried. That's what I would say.
Yeah,
Not
it
just
kind of
an
makes
LPL
you
fan.
makes you wonder if there's going to be like another LCK exodus like there was between 2014 and 2016 where China just like yoinked a bunch of their talent, like half of their like top tier talent.
Yeah, that's what I'm a little bit worried about. So I think it'll affect LPL and LCK if this has a big significant effect, but is to be determined for me still. So I don't really know not much
Hmm.
more about it from me.
Alrighty. Um, back to the LCS. On the esports charts website, which is the website that they use to track viewership, the LCS summer split had the lowest peak viewership count of any LCS season in the last 5 years. So we've kind of talked about a bunch of different times on this show. Viewership is going down. What does that mean? Blah blah blah. Well, the stats don't lie. The viewership was one of the worst, viewed finals in over 5 years, which is pretty crazy.
So the finals thing isn't really all that surprising because it was so quick. A lot of times viewership will go up over time as the series goes on. So that's something that's not really surprising. But the lowest peak I think over summer is kind of a worry. Like the summer split, that's kind of Monka-esque to me. But I mean, it's also not that surprising, right? We've seen drop off. It's just unfortunate that what we thought was gonna come ended up coming true. That's what kind of sucks, I guess.
Yeah, it does feel like the LC. Oh man, I was about to say the LC. It feels like the LCS is dying, but I don't know. I wouldn't say that, but it definitely seems like the interest for your average viewer is declining for sure. It does feel
Yeah,
like a lot of the people that are still, watching LCS on a consistent basis are those people who like to watch all the games, like to be heavily involved within the scene, as opposed to maybe your season 5, 6, 7, where you you know, had a bunch of random fans, ones that would like see like, oh, their favorite team's playing, oh, they would watch their favorite team, and we would see these kinds of series like C9 TSM hit like 600, 700K if it was like a finals matchup, and we're not really at those numbers anymore.
yeah, I think there's a couple of takeaways. One is when people say that the league is dying, I think there's a couple definitions that you could have there. Dying for some people is just the viewership is going down, and then there's some people that think the league is going to die and just fold. That I don't think is going to happen. Yes, the viewership can diminish, but like esports can still be profitable. Like a league like that can still be profitable even if the viewership dies off. Now, it won't be as profitable, I'm sure, but if you've seen how many sponsors the LCS has, like they got plenty of
Oh, we
sources
know.
of income to keep it
We
going.
we see
So
it. We see those sponsors.
they've got a they've got a bunch. That's one
Red
thing the
Bull
LCS
Barrett
does really
Power
well.
Play,
Yeah,
Verizon Six Champion,
yeah.
State
Anyway,
Farm
so
Analyst Desk.
that's something the LCS does really well with. So there's that.
Do do do
Um
do.
What was my other thought? Oh, yes. The other thing was a lot of people, when talking about the diminishing viewership of LCS for this whole past year, have said, and rightfully so, they're like, well, with Bjergsen and Doublelift leaving, it's hard for people to stay
Oh,
interested.
he's
Well, guess
back.
what? One of them's coming back. So we'll see how much of an effect. Well, maybe we'll see. Maybe we won't even know. Maybe there won't be a difference. Who the hell knows? Um, but you got to figure it's got to help, right? It can't
Yeah.
having Bjergsen back.
It'll definitely
So there's
bump
that.
up your week 1 numbers for sure.
Yeah, you would have to assume, and probably just interest overall for TSM fans because when you go 0-6 at one Worlds and then you go, well,
You
you
don't
don't even
make
make Worlds
worlds the
the
3 of the
following
last 4
year.
years.
When you don't even make, yeah, that's not going to really help you very much. But I think something like Bjergsen coming back could spark a little something. But yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see how
So,
that looks.
just to give some quick specifics on that, the peak viewership was 364,000 in the TL 100 Thieves finals, and that was including the co-stream numbers. People were wondering. Next up, we're just gonna kind of go. I'm gonna stick with the North American stuff. We got another former TSM member wanting to return to pro play. Biofrost announced that after taking a year off, he wants to return to pro play. I think for the majority, he was just kind of streaming. Like he wasn't like he would get a couple thousand viewers, I think. Um, But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, he's got decent viewership, honestly, on his stream. But I think one of the issues with Bio is that he's gonna have to reprove himself again because,
yeah,
like Doublelift as well, he was part of that bot lane that didn't look very good last year. In 2020 TSM, their bot lane to me was the obvious standout of where they didn't look good, and you could put that on Bio and Doublelift if you ask me. Even Treats didn't really look that good. I know Treats left to Europe and looked great afterwards, but yeah, they didn't look that good. So I think you have to reprove yourself, and therefore Bio might have to go to another lower tier team because I don't think there's no chance in my mind that 100 Thieves, TSM, Cloud9, or TL really want you.
well, I don't know.
Um,
Maybe TSM dumped Sword Art and they were like, "Oh, let's just go get Biofrost again,"
maybe
like
you
they
know what
did
they could
after he
do.
didn't look very good against when he didn't look very good on CLG, and then they kind of just took him back.
Yeah, what they could do is maybe they look to sign him to an academy contract, and if he looks good in academy, maybe then you bring him up.
You know
I don't know.
what?
That's
What if
possible, but
what if TSM also they dropped Huni and got Hanser and then bought out Sven Skaren? Oh my God,
there
that'd be like
dude, like I've seen actually that's like you're like the third person that I've
I
heard
know.
say that now, counting Reddit and counting Twitch chat and stuff like that. It's so like it's such a meme, but like it is funny anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, to keep on North American stuff, last stuff for NA, Captain Flowers, he posted a thing on Twitter, a little twit longer, and basically was outlining that he's not going to be at Worlds 2021. I think Captain Flowers really burst onto the scene as a caster in like late 2017, early 2018, and was a pretty featured guy for the majority of the last 3 years. And to see him not at Worlds, I feel like is pretty surprising.
Yeah. Um it's disappointing, but you get it, right? It's
Yeah.
like you understand why, but it's
For people who didn't
I
read the tweet
I don't
longer or
know.
see anything about this, he was basically just outlining how he's putting his mental health first over
Yeah,
his
and
job right now, which is
that's
totally
something.
understandable, and
Exactly. No one's
people should
ever
do
gonna
that.
blame you for that. Yeah, exactly. It's disappointing because you want to see your boy. He's one of the best, but it's totally understandable. No one should make him feel bad rather for doing something that's obviously in his best interest like that. So it sucks. But I mean that's gonna happen. Sometimes you got to take care of yourself, and so wish him the best. It's that
Hmm.
simple.
We'll jump over to the EU stuff now. First up, we kind of mentioned this before already. Caps signed a 1-year extension with G2, meaning he's under contract until 2023. What do we
Yeah, we
think?
talked about this a little bit earlier. I don't know. I guess I didn't think it was like a for sure thing. Sorry, I was just trying to catch up on Twitch chat. I guess you can't say like for sure that I was like, yes, they're gonna sign Caps again, or no, they won't. So to me, this is like something that's like this was not guaranteed to happen because we have seen a pretty significant drop off from Caps this year, and so I guess G2 has confidence that they want to keep him, but I'm not so confident that they want to keep anybody else by the sounds of things. Is there any other rumors that I'm missing? Because I know, or anything concrete that I'm missing? Because I know there are rumors.
Well, I don't know if you saw this rumor, but it came out like 30 minutes before we started. But apparently, Wonder renamed one of his solo queue accounts to unemployed top laner.
Oh, I mean that's not surprising at
I
all. He
know,
looked really, really bad.
but
Like that's
also
one of
he's a big memer, so like you don't know if it's like half troll or what.
true, true. But I mean, let's just say if that were to happen, if Wonder is not on G2, is anybody surprised by that?
Well,
I'm not. He looks
yeah,
bad, man.
I know like a lot of the G2 rumors that like the whole team is gonna blow up, but for me, like I don't know, like Wonder was really bad, and I honestly think like they could run back the same roster with a different top laner, and I think obviously I guess the other person that you do want to talk about is Caps because he didn't play very well either. Like he was statistically one of the worst players in the league to start off the summer split, but it is pretty hard to ignore his pedigree and his performances over the last 4 years to just like straight up and cut him or get rid of him for somebody else, especially considering that there probably is not any other options who would have a higher ceiling and who could initially come in and be better than Caps. So for me, like
Bjergsen.
that would be crazy. No way that happens. If that
Wouldn't
happens,
that be?
that would be nuts. Yeah, I don't
But
know. I think
I
it's
don't think that's gonna happen.
I think it's more. I think the most likely G2 roster move for sure is Wonder. But to be honest, like I don't really think if I would get rid of anybody else really. Like I don't know. I don't think
Well,
I would.
so also the rumor there's also rumors about them looking for Broken Blade possibly in the top lane,
Well,
which
he's a
Broken
top
Blade had a
laner,
really
yeah.
good split. A lot of people said, despite the fact that he wasn't on a good team, which would put to bed my theory that I crafted a few months ago that Broken Blade would come back to North America and go to 100 Thieves. I think that hurts that one a little bit, but it's there's a rumor that Broken Blade could go to G2 and play in the top lane. Who knows
Yeah.
if that's happening?
Um,
Another rumor.
yeah. Another contract extension. Kaiser, Mad Lions support, signing a 2-year extension, meaning he'll be under contract until 2023. So his contract was probably going to end. Well, it was going to end after the season. We've had like a couple other. I know Rogue. They made like 2 contract extensions during the LEC playoffs, which I mentioned at the time was like pretty weird considering you're gonna sign an extension to one of your players in the middle of the season before the season is over and before like you put everything to bed. Because I was thinking about the scenario like compare this to Shadow from last year. Do you think like if would you have been surprised at all if Mad Lions offered Shadow a contract extension before World started? Like I would have been like, "Oh yeah, that's great. He's a really good jungler." And I wouldn't have been surprised at all. But then obviously to
I
see
don't
him
think I would have been surprised, no. But I don't remember when he started to fall off. I know he fell off at Worlds,
well,
but
no,
I don't remember if
it
it
was at
started in
Worlds.
summer or not.
No, it
Okay.
was at Worlds. Like he was like one of the best junglers in the league to end the split. And it just I don't know, to me, like it just feels super awkward to give a player a contract extension when the season is almost over because you still have more games to play. Like what if Kaiser just like chokes it up? Like not to mention Kaiser was another player that came into Worlds 2020 with a lot of hype and choked pretty badly. And
Yeah.
like my only fear is like I hope for his sake and for Mad Lion's sake that he just doesn't choke it up and like turn into a bad player, kind of like Shadow did. Not to say,
Well,
well,
and that's any
yeah,
signing is always a gamble, and so you have to figure that the way Mad Lions is thinking about this is that they're really happy with having Kaiser signed before Worlds because they think that he's going to perform well,
I
and
think so
therefore,
too.
if he performs really well at Worlds, then you have to pay him more. And there's also the side from Kaiser; he might be thinking, being in contract, trying to prove myself for a contract at Worlds is not what I want to get into. And so maybe he'll feel more comfortable already having a contract that he can relax and just focus on his game rather than focus on trying to earn his contract for next year. And so maybe it's a win-win for both of them. And that's usually when you get a signing, is if both teams or both parties feel like they're getting a win, right?
Yeah,
So
no,
that to
and
me would be my theory as to why they signed now.
I
Just
mean,
a theory.
it does totally make sense. It's just the worry is like if he does play bad, like then you kind of lock yourself into a situation where you've paid for this
Yes.
player for an additional 2 years, and you know he's not the same.
And
And like
that's the risk that, yeah.
yeah, I mean it's
get
a
what
risk.
you're saying,
I think players like Inspired, Larson, and Kaiser, those guys who have got these contracts kind of in the middle of LEC playoffs and before Worlds, I think they are going to be players who will continue to play very, very well, which is why I think it's fine. But I feel like if this were to become a norm, I would be a bit worried for some of these organizations making those kinds of moves.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's really interesting. It is
Mhm.
you got to wonder why it's happening, but I don't think we'll have any answers until maybe the off season, and maybe even then we don't get any answers as to why they're making these decisions. But yeah,
Alrighty. Next up, some SK news. Jesus, their coach, and treats their
and
oh
and player Justice was their player
yeah
as well.
for a little bit, and then treats their support slash jungler XD. They announced that they were exploring options with other teams, which, yes, that means they're still under contract with their current team, but in all likelihood, it means that they're going to be going to a different team.
And for those that don't know or don't remember or whatever, Treats was jungling, but this was not because he wanted to jungle. This was because SK was put in this kind of emergency situation where they didn't really have any other backup junglers or anything like that.
Well, they
And so
did, but
Treats
they
ended
just
up
didn't
going.
use it. So kind of
Sure, they
weird
thought
shit.
their best option. They thought their best option was to go with Treats, and he actually looked pretty good in the jungle, all things considering. But
Not at the
Treats
start, though.
wants to be. He wants to be a support. He's been pretty vocal about that. That he wants to support. So I believe that when he's looking at his other options and other teams, it's probably for support. But let's not say for sure, but probably for support.
Yep, and I think he'll probably be a player that a lot of the mid-tier LEC teams would want to acquire. I think maybe top teams might be a bit of a reach because I don't think he has enough of a enough of a portfolio to warrant like top team attention, even though I think he is a player who has the potential to do that because I think he's really, really good. I think I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him move up in terms of like the LEC hierarchy with teams.
Yeah.
Last up, Tinks. He's their jungle. Who the hell? What does Tinks do?
I thought it was their mid.
No, their mid laner's blue.
I thought they benched him. I don't know, man. I can't.
Oh yeah, they benched Tinks. That's what it was. They benched him because they were like, this guy sucks. He's a free agent.
Oh, okay.
That's all I was gonna say. He was officially a free agent.
I watched plenty of LEC this year, and I can't remember still.
Yeah.
So.
Next up, I should have mentioned this when we were talking about caps, but Grabs, G2's head coach. Is it not announced? But is it announced or is it the rumor? It's like a big rumor.
I think it's rumor. I don't think it's officially announced,
but it's big rumor.
Pretty damn likely.
Well,
and not only, I believe the rumor is also not that he is being replaced or anything like that, but that he also wants to leave. I believe it's being announced as mutual. Now, you could always argue that a lot of these things are not mutual and blah 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 blah. Sure, but that's what the rumor was, is that he wasn't happy with the team and that they're not happy with the stumble that they had towards the end of the year, and not making Worlds is not good enough for G2. So it looks like the rumor that's being released is that it's on both parties to want to split.
He's getting the Reaper treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only. Well, I don't know. He was the first guy that got kicked when they didn't make Worlds.
Yeah.
The only other thing to note from that is they did sign Nelson, who was like a pretty big LPL coach at the time, who before joining G2 was a coach of LNG. So I would have to imagine that he will probably just move up into the head coaching role unless they were to acquire any other big free agent EU head coach, or if they really wanted to bring in an international coach from like the LCK or the LPL. I would assume they'll probably just stick in-house with Nelson. Similar to what C9 sort of did when they just bumped up Rain over to head coach. Obviously, they brought in Mithy, and now Mithy's the head coach, but I would think same sort of thing will happen.
Yeah. Yep.
Last piece of EU news is Vizicachi. Yes, the Unicorns of Love, the Unicorns of Love legend and LEC legend wants to return to pro play as well. Right now, he's a Mad Lions positional coach, and I think he joined before the start of summer to kind of help up coach Armut, and Armut's
was it before summer?
I think so.
I thought we announced this in quick news just a few weeks ago. I thought it was before playoffs.
I mean, maybe it was. I don't know.
I might be maybe I'm making things up. Don't rely on me for my memory. Sorry, go on.
Well, he wants to play pro again, so he's a beast. He brings some name value, some brand value to a team.
Yeah, he's been around for quite some time.
He's kind of old now, though. I think he's like 27 or something.
Yeah.
But I mean,
hey man, come on. That's not that old.
Whatever. Okay. I think that's it.
There's the Vex stuff.
Well, I meant from all the like LCS like pro play stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is, last thing, the new champion, Vex.
This is what I always say when a new champion comes out. It's like they actually do a really good job of like the personality of these champions, and some of the stuff that they do with them are really cool. Like Gwen with the massive scissors, like that's cool, and Viego stealing someone's body. Like, it's not balanced fucking at all, but it is really cool. And so they always come out with these really cool champions, but it's like, stop coming out with new champions. As much as I love the personality and all the stuff that comes with it, they need to stop coming out with champions for this game, man. There's too many champions that need balancing first. That's always going to be my opinion on it until they start to just balance the game first. But with every new champion that comes out, it makes the game more and more difficult to balance. So
yeah,
whatever. It's like, it looks like Amumu's like, I don't want to say friend. It's like permanent emo Amumu.
Yeah. No, I all I've seen from the champion, I have no clue what any of the abilities I actually do. I saw the 1-minute teaser video. Like, I know you can probably right now go up and look like her abilities, read them and whatnot. I just haven't because I just haven't had time lately.
It's up there. You can find it.
Yeah.
You know how Amumu's like all sad? Vex is like sad but not crying.
Well, her whole thing is
doom
like
and gloom.
Yeah, the whole thing is she fears people, right? That's like a big part of her kit. Is she fears
She's got like a
people?
little shadow or something. She's got
Yeah, I
like a
don't know.
shadow.
It looks cool.
She
Like the
talks to her shadow. It's kind of like a Willump and Nunu effect where she's got a little partner and her partner is her shadow. Anyways, the champion looks
like
really
Kindred
cool.
and Lamb kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
I
old
think it
effect.
looks cool. I saw only a small like little bit of it. I think it looks cool.
Yeah, it does look cool. So honestly, I'll probably like the champion, but I still wish they'd stop coming out with more. But what else is new?
Yeah,
That's always the story with those champions. What else we got, J&T? Is
that's
that
it.
everything?
Yep.
Okay, schedule, because our schedule is a fucking nightmare. And well, honestly, the world's schedule is a nightmare. So obviously, we're doing an episode this week. That's right now. And then our next episode is probably not next week, right, J&T? It's probably 2 weeks from now, we think.
Yeah, most likely, like for sure, we're gonna have an episode up in 2 weeks. Because it'll, that's the week before play-ins. Presumably, the world's group show draw is the world's draw. Jesus Christ, the world's group
Group
draw show. There we go. I finally got it. That is going to happen presumably from sometime now to the start of Worlds. And so hopefully when that happens, we can, have an episode to talk about the play-in teams, whatnot, see if anybody has like a presumably hard group or whatever. But unless that happens, like if that happens tomorrow, like, I mean, our episode might be next week. But as of right now, like it's kind of, we're just waiting for Worlds to start. So 2 weeks for sure will be our first episode where we start really covering Worlds. And then the way that we're going to do our episodes is we're basically going to try to get them out ASAP when a stage of Worlds ends. So just to list off some dates here. Play-in stage runs from October the 5th to October the 9th. So we're going to do an episode talking about the play-in stage right after the play-in stage ends that same day, October the 9th.
On the 9th, okay.
And then World's group stage starts 2 days later on October the 11th to October the 13th. That's your quote-unquote week 1 of group stage. We're going to episode that day right after the first week of groups concludes. Then the next quote-unquote week of groups runs from the 15th to the 18th. And we're going to do an episode on the 18th right after the conclusion. Then we get into quarterfinals, which happens on October the 26th. October the 22nd to the 25th. We are then going to do our episode the day after the quarterfinals, which would be October the 26th. Then the semifinals run from October 30th to October 31st. We're going to do our episode the day after on November the 1st. And then the finals are November the 6th. And we're going to do our episode on November the 7th, the day after finals.
Yeah, so all this to say that it's a mess, guys. We're going to do our best to keep you guys updated because, look, things can fucking change, man. It's so hard to keep up with Worlds, especially this year. I don't even know if the people organizing Worlds are completely sure with what's going on right now because they're probably in what's the word, rush mode, whatever you want to call it, because of their pivot to a different location and all that stuff. But we're going to do our best to keep you guys updated. If we're going live, we'll let you guys know on Twitter. And the other thing, as J&T's talking with chat right now, the other thing is we believe we're going to try to do our episodes earlier. So we were doing them like pretty much in the middle of the night. We were starting at like 12 midnight, like EST. I think we're going to try to do kind of similar to what we're doing now, where we do it earlier in the evening or night and start maybe around 9 p.m. EST. But again, that stuff we'll let you guys know as well. Just keep an eye on Twitter because I'll usually tweet out and usually J&T will retweet or whatever. And so we'll try to keep you guys updated on that. That is it for this episode. Lots of chat in the live chat. We always appreciate you guys helping us out and giving us some things that we missed. I'm sorry to the people in the live chat this time. There was a lot of stuff that I can't read it. I can't multitask. I am one of the worst multitaskers there is on this goddamn planet. So if there was any messages for us while we were talking, big time apologies. And if you guys got any subs, any Prime subs, feel free to throw them our way. We could definitely use them more than Jeff Bezos could. They are free. And you guys get a cool little bean soup emote, I think, or something like that. So
yeah,
always appreciate your guys' supports. J&T, I'm throwing it to you if you have any shout outs or anything you want to say before we close it out.
Nope.
Cygnus asks, are you guys going to compete with Travis? If he has episodes on the same day as us, then probably yeah. But I mean, who knows? Things can definitely change. We have no idea. It's gonna be a long month. Let's just put it that way. We'll do our best. But again, thank you guys so
Luckily, the
much.
mornings will not be as early as they would have been if they were in
Yes,
China.
that's one thing. The EU schedule has got to be so much better on us than the China schedule would be. So that's pretty good. Anyways, thank you one last time, guys. Always appreciate your guys' support. This has been episode 58 of the Clown Fiesta podcast, and we will see you guys when we see you.